Get going here in just a second. I'll just explain some of the ground rules that we have. When you go to ask a question, please limit it to 2 minutes. The legislatures have 3 minutes. We got a nice little stop clock here. Just keep track of it. If it's green, you're ready to go. Caution, start winding up your question or your answers. In red, please get close to ending it so we can move on to the next question or topic. So we're going to get started here. Any of the legislatures, would they like to introduce themselves? Oh, wait just 1 second. When you ask a question or you're talking, please talk clearly into the mic, and then also state your name and the town you're from. Oh, I'm Charlie Roy from Farm Bureau. So thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Joe Andriano. I live here in Orwell and represent the Addison County District. I serve on the Judiciary Committee. Other things you'd like me to say in my introduction?
No, I think you pretty much rolled it up.
Great. Please follow my social media. I will say that on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm at JAndriano for Vermont, JAndrianoForVT. And I also have a blog, which is JAndrianoForVermont at blogspot.com or blogger.com. Those are things I should check before I come up here and stand and say what it is. But you can certainly find me on Twitter and all those other places very easily and find a link to my blog there. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that's legislator? I guess you're the only one.
Wow. Sounds good.
Who would like to hop up and start with the first question? Go ahead. Yeah, come right over here. You can speak right here. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I'm concerned about the transgender movement myself.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ed Wheeler, East Middlebury. So, how many human genders are there, and should public funds be used to help someone try to change their gender?
Well, it has been a long time since I've studied gender theory, but I do know that sex and gender are perceived as two different things. Sex, of course, being that which we have at birth from our chromosomes, and gender being the expression of that, that we have in the way that we present ourselves to the world. How many genders there are, I'm not qualified to answer that question, and so I won't answer that question. As for whether public funds should help people transition, I would say that public funds should be used for everything we do when it comes to medicine. And so I would say yes, but I would qualify that by saying that yes, in the sense that we should have universal health care, and all health care is a human right. Health care is something that we deserve to have as human beings in a civilized society such as ours, such as all Westerns, or nearly all Western societies do. And so I would say, to the extent that here we have a medical procedure we're talking about, and I believe that all medical procedures must be, or ought to be, done by, through a public system of insurance, then I would say yes.
Thank you. Is there any more further comments on that? Is there another question? Or?
I will say one other thing. I would recommend to people take a look at the Republican governor of Utah when he vetoed the anti-transgender youth in sports bill in Utah. A Republican, again. He wrote what is perhaps one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. It was his letter against the bill that he vetoed. And in it, it's just always struck me so much because in it he talks about how there were so few kids. I think there were 8 kids that the bill affected in Utah. And he said, for 8 kids, we've done so much. He said, 8 kids who are just looking for love. He said, if I have to choose between perhaps some transgender youth playing in a sport versus these children perhaps committing suicide, because we know that transgender, gay, queer youth commit suicide at a higher rate than youth who consider themselves to be straight and cisgendered. He said, I can't veto this bill. It's going to result in kids committing suicide. because they need the love, they need the belonging, they need the place to be. This is a Republican governor of Utah. Look it up. It is the last third of his letter vetoing that bill. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. And I think he speaks very strongly and plainly about how we need to embrace love, we need to embrace care, we need to embrace understanding of each other, no matter what our gender may be, our gender identity, our sexual orientation, or anything.
Thank you. Yes, miss, would you like to move over to the microphone and state your name and the town?
If I respond to him, do I say it 2 minutes later on?
Sure. We're open here. Thank you.
So my name is Carol Kaufman, and I'm from Addison, and I would just like to respond to the suicide concern. We all have the suicide concern, no matter what side of the tracks that we're from. So if suicide is the result of the absence of the One Direction gender-affirming healthcare model, which is what he is talking about, then why doesn't history show mysterious exponential suicide rates of youth when today's gender-affirming model was not an option of care, and when the so-called conversion therapy was the mainstream model of care? So what Vermont has done in H89 and S37 is they are protecting a one model of care, and that's the medical protection that he is talking about, augmenting the body to try to conform it to the mental state. And what Vermont has done is they have outlawed calling prohibition of conversion therapy. That would be national, worldwide experts who believe that it's the best interest of a child to work with them who have gender dysphoria, and to work with them to be at peace with their gender, their sex at birth. And so my question to the Montpelier is, why aren't you, they have imbalanced testimony, and they need to bring in balanced testimony.
Thank you for those comments. Yes.
Yeah, first of all, the question was asked, why does one thing has happened with another thing? Correlation is not causation. And so therefore, just because something is happening does not mean something else caused that thing. You have to prove causation. You can't say that two things occur around the same time and therefore there is causation. So correlation is not causation. Number two, I worked personally on H89 very closely. H89 doesn't outlaw anything. H89 says that if a doctor provides care, then they are shielded from lawsuits so long as they were providing that care within the standards set by their profession. I don't see anything wrong with that. If a doctor provides this care, we all know that states such as Texas are not only banning this care, but also saying that private citizens can sue because they know that this stuff is happening. And so what our law says is that if a private citizen is to sue a Vermont doctor, someone from another state, such as Texas, decides to sue a Vermont doctor because they believe that this person provided gender-affirming care, then that is not a legitimate cause of action in Vermont, nor should it be, for two reasons. One, that doctor provided care as per the standards of care set forth by the Vermont Board of Medical Practitioners. And number two, it's a states' rights issue. This is the standard in Vermont. We are not Texas. We are not California. We are not Alabama. We are not Michigan. We are not New York. I can list 49 other states that we are not. And so why should the laws of other states be put upon people who are acting in Vermont, who are doing things in Vermont? States' rights, simple states' rights. I'm not going to vote for anything or that would have the laws of Texas or the laws of California or the laws of any state say, well, someone can sue you a person in Vermont because you did something legally in Vermont that's not legal in Texas, but you did it in Vermont. It's states' rights, and something I believe very strongly in. So,
All right, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, sure. Just speak up to the mic, please.
So I have the bill here, and I would like to read legally protected healthcare activity. Quote, gender-affirming healthcare services means all supplies, care, services of a medical, behavioral health, mental health, surgical, psychiatric, therapeutic, diagnostic, preventative, rehabilitative, or supportive nature. And remember the word supportive nature. Relating to the treatment of gender dysphoria, including insurance coverage for any of the foregoing. Gender-affirming healthcare services do not include conversion therapy as defined by 18 VSA 8351. Now remember, conversion therapy is very simple. You can look up liberals, feminists, who all support the option. Parents should have that option in Vermont of what the best care for their child is. So all conversion therapy is that if a child comes in and the child is confused with their gender, they could even get that confusion at school. And the parents and the psychologists decide that it's in the best interest of the child's care to work with them to be at peace with their gender sex. That's conversion therapy. And Vermont should not outlaw a therapy that parents could have access to, because children, it's like 80–90% of them with gender dysphoria, by the time they reach, get through puberty, 80% will get at peace with their gender. And what they're doing is they're medicalizing them before their brain is even developed.
Thank you.
it's not an accurate representation of the bill. I worked on this bill personally. What this bill does is it protects if a Vermont healthcare provider provides healthcare that is considered gender-affirming care to someone who is out of state, let's say a student who is at high school here and working with a psychiatrist. That student went to college in another state, let's say Texas, and they continue to get that health care. Under Texas's law, they could be sued in Vermont. Well, in Texas, the lawsuit would be in Texas, but this person, this doctor who is in Vermont to provide the health care in Vermont, could be sued by someone in Texas. This bill doesn't outlaw anything. It doesn't say conversion therapy is outlawed. It does not say that you can't provide this care. What it says is that if you provide this health care in Vermont, and someone is in another state that you provided to, such as a college student, as I said earlier, who went to school in Texas after being a Vermont resident, then it's going to be protected. It doesn't outlaw anything.
Okay, thank you. I believe we've had a couple more legislatures show up. Would you like to introduce yourself now that you've had your morning coffee?
I found you. It's been a long time since I've been able to come out and join the legislative breakfast. I'm Diane Lanford, Representative Lanford. I live in Vergennes and I represent Addison 3, Ferrisburg, Vergennes, Canton, Waltham, Addison, and a part of New Haven. I have been in office for 15 years. I serve as chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and so we have been locked away almost since January working on the budget. So I am out and free for a couple of weeks anyway before we go to committee a conference on the budget, but happy to join you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Bray. I live in Bristol, and I'm one of your 2 state senators. It's nice to be back in Orwell. I haven't been to a legislative breakfast here since before the pandemic, so it's good to see such a good turnout. In the Senate, you serve on 2 committees, and in the mornings I chair Natural Resources and Energy. In the afternoons, I serve on the Finance Committee, and I'll be happy to stand aside and take questions while we're working this morning.
Okay. All right, is there any questions for our legislators? Yeah, sure, get up and answer another question, or ask another question, and then we can see if anybody else has anything.
Well, I just think it's important because there is a law. So I read that S37 says gender affirming care does not include conversion therapy. That is in S37 and it is in H89. Those of us on that side, we don't call it conversion therapy. It's just an option that parents should have and their doctors should be covered with the same health care insurance. So 18, conversion therapy definition, quote, conversion therapy, this is Vermont statute, means any practice by a mental health care provider that seeks to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, including efforts to change behaviors of gender expressions and to change sexual or romantic attractions or feelings toward individuals of the same sex or gender. And then, so that's their definition of conversion therapy. So it's about expressions of feelings. So children, their brains aren't developed. You know, our children think they're Superman. They want to fly. They pretend like they're dogs and animals. And so parents need to have the right to decide the care, and S37 and H89 should protect all choices. Actually, I'll just finish it up so I don't keep coming back up here. But let me see if I can just do it. Here we go. So H89 will constrict Article 22. So Article 22 was created to be very vague. Reproductive rights. Remember, it was voted on in November of last year. And so H89 and S37 constrict Article 22, reproductive liberty, without voter approval or day in court. The companion bills will protect the one model of care for a minor child who may be experiencing gender identity dysphoria, therefore interfering in the Vermont state constitutional right of reproductive liberty. Vermont state, I don't care about the other states, they need to stay out of the parent-child and doctor relationship.
Thank you. Is there any comments from the legislatures, and then we'll take some more questions.
You did a nice job, Joseph.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, Lynn's got something, and then
Oh,
I'd like
okay,
to.
then go ahead.
No, I want to say that my name is Lynn Dyke. I'm from Bristol. I want to say I agree with you totally. Parents' rights are being eroded slowly but surely here. And the one bill that, it never went anywhere, but that children could get gender affirming care or whatever, or hormone, whatever.
Replacement therapy.
And,
Treatment.
yeah, treatment without parental consent. The schools are doing things behind the parents' back and all this, so I think, you know, when you talk about kids and their mental health and committing suicide and all that, if they live in a home where their parents don't even know what's going on, or they're doing something that the parents don't agree with, and then they are the ones that have to take care of these kids afterwards, to not have a say-so and be treated like criminals is terrible. So I think that we really need to stop and think what we're doing. There is a lot of mental things going on here, and it's not because they're not getting their gender affirming care or the right pronouns or anything. It's that they are being so confused and stuff is putting on them that they should not have to even be dealing with.
Thank you. Would any legislatures like to speak now? Have any comments on
I didn't hear
this?
a question, but.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe we got a question up next. Go ahead.
Well, it's not so much a question, but I'm Donna Scott, and I'm from North Harrisburg, and I have been a teacher for many years, 25 years, formally in local high schools. And I have seen a great change in what education has become. And it's frightening, really, because children are being, at a very young age, when they don't have capability to make the types of decisions and and process the information that they're getting in schools. It used to be that we wanted to teach our children how to read, how to write, how to think, how to get along with other people, and it's really become very, very strange. And parents' rights are being ignored completely. How can we say that we're going to let somebody take care of our children, bring them across state lines, bring minors? There's no age limit to this. We could have somebody from Texas bringing an 8-year-old child into this state without the parents' knowledge or consent. That's kidnapping to me. And it's not just doctors. They talk about care practitioners. That could be anybody. It could be their babysitter. All they have to do is say they're coming over this line, over to Vermont. How are we protecting our children? We're worried about protecting the state from being sued when our children are being taken, and they could be taken somewhere else from Vermont and go to another state. It doesn't mean they have to have that care here. It's really giving the government tremendous power over our families, over our children, over our whole governmental system. This is not right. And somebody has to be willing to say that it's not right. You talk about Bill 89, House 89, and I have here a testimony from the Women's Declaration International. Oh, I'm sorry.
If you have a quick question, ask it, and then let's move on.
Okay. The question is, what do our legislators, who are they protecting? Who are they protecting? Are they protecting the state, or are they protecting our children? That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Protecting our children, because again, that's not an accurate representation of the bill. Having sat through hours and days of testimony on H89, one of the things I will say, the statement was made that anyone can bring a child across state lines. It's not true, because we talked about that in our committee, and we spoke to multiple witnesses on that issue. And in speaking to multiple witnesses on that issue, what we learned is if, for example, a babysitter brings an 8-year-old across state lines, as was commented a moment ago, a doctor would not be able to do that because it would be against the standards of medical care. This bill is not protecting the state, about protecting the state from being sued. This bill is not about protecting anything like that. It's about protecting a doctor who provides care to someone who's out of state. The example I gave earlier, a college student who lived in Vermont, who travels to Texas, who wants to continue to get the therapy that they were getting before they left Vermont to go to college in Texas, and then someone wants to sue that doctor from Texas because Texas has these laws saying you can do stuff like that. It protects the doctor. So that's what it does. So again, as for protecting children, yes, we should be protecting children. That's part of what we're doing here. Protecting parents, yes, we are, because the parents would have probably gotten the kid the therapist. So we are about protecting children. We are about protecting doctors, which they certainly need right now, considering all the violence we're seeing against our healthcare professionals, which is quite a bit of violence we're seeing against our healthcare professionals right now. So we are about protecting Vermonters. That's what H89 does.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. It's a pleasure to work with you. I can't speak directly to the bill, although I would agree that we are protecting Vermonters' rights to do what they would like to be able to do legally. I think the fears that are being brought up is because there's a very small, a minute group that would possibly be either inhibited from being able to express themselves, but I don't think it's as pervasive, although I could be proven wrong. What I can say is that when I am not in the legislature, I am grandma-in-chief, and I spend a lot of time with my grandson who is 6, who is now in kindergarten, and if anybody would like to, I'd like to make a pitch for the fact that your school districts need people. I am a substitute teacher at Virgins in Ferrisburg Elementary School, although during campaign season I said I don't think I should be able to go in the high school, and I don't think I would classify myself as being a substitute teacher for calculus just yet. But definitely in the elementary schools, and it is an absolute joy to work within the school system. Again, I had done years and years ago, had served in special ed. So if anybody has time, I'm making a pitch that your school districts need you, the students need you, and families need you. So see your school district. Doesn't take too long to become a substitute or a helper at the school or volunteer, but you do have to pass a background check and your fingerprints, and I'm really glad that I did, because that would have been very embarrassing if I didn't.
Thank you. Do we have a question here?
Can we change the topic?
Yes, we can.
I'm over here waiting to do the same thing. I have no questions.
Great.
But.
Oh, wait. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I did. So House Bill 89, I serve in the Senate. I'm not familiar with the details of 89. Certainly Representative Adriano knows it inside out and has already spoken to it in detail. But in general, I've always supported the rights of patients to get the best care they can, and that is across the spectrum. You move it up to the patient in consultation, which if they're a minor, with parents, and also with healthcare professionals. So I think there are concerns that I think sort of move away from medical judgment into judgment about the patients or their choices, and I'd say I think it's always important to respect the right of the patient and take the judgment out of the system.
Thank you. We have a question here. Please state your name and your town, please.
Okay. So it seems like Bristol is well represented here. Linda, Chris, and myself. I'm Linda Andrews, and I'm from Bristol, and I'm a nurse practitioner in women's health care. I come from 3 generations of Vermont doctors, and I'm here to speak about something that all of us should be concerned about, and that is all the health insurance of what we're subjected to today with. I'm with a group of people who got the bill H156 and Senate Bill 74 put up on the wall, and this has to do with every Vermonter could get primary health care without any cost. We would have the single payer be in Vermont. Just primary care, universal primary health care for all Vermonters. And that was up on the wall. We had, in the House, we had 59 co-sponsors, and in the Senate, we had 10 co-sponsors, and it never came off the wall. It's like such a big problem, and we believe that if it came off the wall, and we got testimony, and then we could get a financial plan, what it would actually cost, which would actually we think we could afford, but we would get that, and then next year we could figure out whether we could really pay for it or whatever, but it's, right now, where the poor primary care doctors are not properly reimbursed, and they're overdone with paperwork with all the insurance companies and the administrative paperwork, so they can't do their work. We're losing our primary care providers. And so we feel if we had universal primary health care, it would actually attract primary health care providers here. It would keep the ones we have. It would reduce the amount of emergency care, because if people went in for, say, their blood pressure or their diabetes and they went to their primary care and they prevented it, they wouldn't be clogging up the ER with all these things that could have been taken care of at the primary care level. And so my question is, what can we do? I think it's so important, and what can we do to get this off the wall so we can have testimony and we can have a financial plan? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can watch this.
Thank you, Linda. As the lead sponsor of the Senate version, S74, there is a House companion bill. I appreciate that Linda's brought this whole subject up. In Vermont, we spend as much on healthcare as it's an equal size between public and private spending. It's the same size as the entire state budget. So there is a tremendous amount of money already being invested in healthcare. The question is, how cost effective is it? And we have roughly 200,000 Vermonters who either through a lack of health care or through very large deductibles, in essence, don't end up with health care. So when I'm not in session, the last several years I've been doing carpentry again, and I'm working with a lot of tradespeople who are making good wages. I ask people routinely, how are you doing on health care? And the answer I hear over and over again, no one has yet to say to me, oh, don't worry, everything's all set. What I typically hear is either they don't have it at all, or they have very large deductibles, like $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 deductibles, which for the most part means you're going to pay out of pocket if you need health care. And so what it ends up meaning is they don't go for health care, they don't engage in regular primary care, and primary care is a good investment. Most of health care is an expense that we take on because we need to, somebody's ill. Primary care is different in that it is an investment. If you invest in primary care, you reduce costs over your lifetime and for any particular disease. So it's a really cost-effective investment, and Vermont has enough money already in the system. The question is, how do we spend it? What are the rules of the road for how that money is spent? So I hope that, just as Linda says, that we will take that bill up, get the study done, and come back to it when we can talk in clear numbers next year.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind everybody, we do have a stop clock here. I've been real lenient this morning, but please ask a question. You have 2 minutes for the question and 3 minutes to respond. Thank you. Is there a question?
Yes. Andrea Treadway, I'm from Orwell, and I'm on the select board here, and I'm very pleased that Diane is here today because the select board is very concerned about the transportation budget and 22A. So I'm on the Transportation Advisory Committee for the town and heard that the budget has basically been kind of cut, and not so much from the state, but from the feds. So I want to know how we're going to deal with the death trap of 22A and if it's still on schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It is, to the best of my knowledge, still on schedule. There is a multi-year plan to address and upgrade 22A, which my ride down this morning gave me an opportunity to feel all of where the bumps are. I know. not as bad. Maybe my tolerance is getting a little higher. I used to be like my little legislative piece on my, the tag for parking. If it fell off, that's how I know that road is really bad. But so 22A has been an issue for many, many years, right? And I am very concerned about the accidents that occur, the truck traffic, the speed in general. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but it feels like the speed is just too much. But there is a multi-year plan. Now, in the budget, this year, we, in the general fund, transportation fund, and education fund are the three major funds, right? The general fund right now is shoring up the transportation fund because of multiple years. As long as I have been there, we have been struggling with how to move away from the gasoline tax as one of the three bases in the transportation fund because it's a diminishing return. It is not producing and it's not going to. People's cars get, for a lot of good reasons. So we need to move away from that type of taxation system for transportation. So the general fund this year has 10.9 million in order to make sure that the projects can fully match and draw down the federal money for 24 and 25 in the capital bill as well. Now, the governor and I will have kind of a odds as to whether or not we should put away money for 27 just yet, or there's other ways to there's other emergencies within Vermont between housing and childcare that need attention as well. But the transportation pull down from the federal formula fund is 100% this year with the support of $10 million from the general fund. Last year there was about 22 million from the general fund in there. And it would be really nice if we can start to shore up the funding in the transportation world in the out years to make sure that we can that it can survive on its own, to maximize. So two things happen within the T world. It has had diminishing returns, like over time. It has really been a tough stretch to keep our federal match, which Vermont typically always 100% pulls down formula funds. We are not always accessing all of the other federal opportunities that are out there because we're really stressed. So two things happen. We're diminishing our transportation fund return, and then the new infrastructure bill increased the opportunity for Vermont to access at 30% greater. So that gap just got like that. So we're going to have to, in the out years, be able to figure out how to maximize that.
Thank you.
I see the red light.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim, or Bill, can you come up? I'm sorry, I have an appointment where I'm gonna have to get headed. Bill is gonna take over for me and carry on. Thank you, and Bill, thanks. Oh, go ahead, there's another question here, come on up. It's easier getting out of the
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm Cheryl Mitchell from New Haven, and I came mostly to second what Linda has been talking about earlier, but it's thrilling to have the head of the Appropriations Committee here this morning and the Finance Committee here, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Grange and the Farm Bureau for sponsoring these. It's great to see so many people, and it's wonderful that our legislators are here. So we know that the Vermont economy has been undermined by three things: lack of affordable housing for workers, lack of child care, again for workers, and the amazing cost of health care, which is much of it wasted. So I feel like the legislature has done a great job in making plans for affordable housing, and now we're right on the cusp of, I think, solving part of the child care crisis. Thank you all. And just would like to say, I think that there's an awful, I used to work for the Agency of Human Services, so I was in charge of the health department and Medicaid and places like that. There's a huge amount of money in healthcare that's being wasted in Vermont, and if we could get a good study from JFO, I think that we would be able to do what Linda said, which is, and what Chris said, and reinvest this money in primary care so that we'd be spending a lot less on emergency services. We need to get those bills off the walls in the two committees that they're sitting on, so I guess we're here today to ask our legislators, get them off for us, please, so that we can get the study done.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's see if I can do that. I feel like I've been getting shorter over time anyway. So appropriations, the budget is now over in the Senate, but we've made some significant investments in with our one-time money. This particular year, I've been there a while. I've been there through, I think, the scarcity of times, so I have sort of a very, wrap your hands around that money and hang on to it because another time is coming. But we have an enormous amount of one-time dollars in this budget, and making the investments in, like you said, in starting up the paid family leave, the child care, the next level of where we can go with child care. But most importantly, we have the most investment is in housing. Housing has been the #1 concern for Vermonters, and it's where we put an enormous amount of one-time investment in there. But the one thing that came out that was not on, at least not on my radar screen, to the extent that how out of balance it was the Medicaid rates. There was a rate study that came out from the administration and stakeholders in February that we needed to react to. And so in this budget, we increase the Medicaid rates for primary care, which is, I absolutely agree with you, it's where we need to go. But we've got a very hollowing out system between not the workforce in every possible industry, but nurses, doctors, being able to keep them staffed. The capacity within hospitals and in nursing homes is diminished because there isn't enough staff to take care of people. So it's a real concern in our healthcare system. So this week in Montpelier, I've scheduled for our committee to hear more about from the Green Mountain Care Board and from the One Care and a few other stakeholders on this. And I don't know where it will go this year, but I think it's something that we really have to pay attention to.
Thank you. Who's up next? If you gravitate towards the microphone, either down here or up there, that's great. There are some more chairs down here. People in the middle want to come down through the middle and easily get here.
I sit all day for work.
You're all right, Andrew. Other gentlemen back there that might want to sit down. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Teresa Nolan, from here in Orwell. Thank you for coming here. I do have a question on a different topic, but first I do want to say that I am the mother of a 7th grader at Fairhaven, 13 years old. The generation of shooter drills, lockdown drills from the time they were in kindergarten. And my child has had actual, not drills, actual lockdowns. And the fear that puts into me is, it's hard to explain. They've gone through this their whole life. And I am very involved with their schooling, with talking to their teachers, the administration. What the schools and the teachers and the administration and the counselors have been going through in the last few years. These people are amazing. I don't know how they do it, and we are asking them to do more and more, and it's an impossible task. I think they're doing a great job. I think they need more support to do it better. The real problem with schools are not the influence when it comes to gender and gender dysphoria and all those things. It's the internet. It's not school. School is dealing with the results of what kids are seeing all over. Now, I disagree with your position. That's fine, you have your right. My child identifies as they, them, and I am fully supportive. And the chance of suicide for these kids is very high. I want my child to live. I want my child to be happy. My question for the legislators is, the real problem is the other day after the incident in Tennessee, the tragedy there, my child says, "Mom, what if it happens here?" What are we doing to prevent that from happening here?
I'm going to have to say the red light is on.
The green
Thank
light
you.
started late.
Thank you. I am very concerned as well. Having worked in the school district in the 80s and in the early 90s, and before I did this, I also was a catechism teacher at St. Peter's for like 18 years. You're right. There's an underlying concern around this that is just almost palpable all the time, that you're waiting for this shoe to fall, that Vermont is not immune, and we are aware of it. Whether it's at the school or any public, a church, the State House. I've been there long enough that I think before, emails and things that would come, we now have a full-time staff to just deal with the threats that come into us. We have specific places and emails that come in that don't open them, you just send them right to the threat alert. That's unheard of. And the lockdown and drill pieces even within the State House. And I've told our chief of police, it's like, no, I'm good. We go out door to door, we meet people, we come here. This is where we are, and I have not felt that level. But at school, as a substitute too, there's times that I've walked around school and I've said to myself, I shouldn't be able to get that close. I shouldn't be able to get this close. We're friendly and we want to stay that way. There's that balance between letting fear override everything and making sure that you can do everything that's possible to provide a protecting environment without letting the fear override it. And that's kind of where I operate every day. But even when I'm a substitute out there at the playground, you watch the perimeter just maybe a little bit more differently than I've done in the past.
Any other topics out there this morning?
I just want to follow up a little bit with
Diane. Want to do the mic? Or we're putting this on television, so we got to get the sound in the system.
So in 2018, when my oldest daughter was a senior and my youngest daughter was a sophomore, Fairhaven had a very real threat. And because, thankfully, of the legislature and Governor Scott, there are now laws in place that if you see something before it happens, people can now be taken and either put in a mental health facility, put in jail. So it's unfortunate that it had to happen, but it's a good thing that people saw something, said something, and that, well, he's now almost 23, he was put in a mental institution until last year, and I'm hoping he got the help that he so richly needed. But because I called and a whole bunch of people called and went up to Montpelier, change happened, and it's incremental. So if there's something that anyone in this room thinks needs to happen, and it doesn't have to be about school shootings, it doesn't have to be about schools, it could be anything, like the bill you want off the wall. Get up there. Get up there. So.
She does.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
do.
I don't mean to hog it up, but I have never seen anything move so quickly within a state house. From no response to never a response. When Fairhaven occurred, with information that came forward, that almost instantaneously, within 6 weeks, Vermont acted, both from the legislative, House, Senate, the governors, the administration. Students came from all over the state, thousands of them, to the State House, and they came in and they were polite and firm, and they looked us in the eye and they said, will you protect us? Well, and we did. Within 6 weeks, that bill moved and was signed.
It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Yep. It was great for the pages. The pages that was a Valentine's Day that Florida, when things really started to change. And it was every 6 weeks there's a new group of 7th, 8th graders that come in as pages within the State House. And it was the first day of the second group of pages when they came in, when this started to happen. They got to witness firsthand from the beginning conversation, and on their last day of their time at the State House was when the bill was signed. They got to witness firsthand democracy in an incredible movement. So I do plug that a couple of years ago, it took me 4 years to get it off the wall. And I'm there. 4 years to get the youth council bill off the wall and is now law. And this last year that they have now started meeting, and a part of that is that they meet monthly and they are going to advise both the governor and the legislature on youth issues. So I look forward to their strong voice on a variety of subjects.
The mic is open.
Just very quickly, just add, we do ask our schools to do more and more over time. They really have become a place of education and also a place where we deliver a lot of social service. So we now have gone to universal free meals because there is hunger amongst families, and particularly children is a bigger issue in the state than I think most people might appreciate. And hungry kids are not in a good position to learn. So we're providing meals. There's also counseling for kids, which you might expect, but also because kids are coming steadily to the school, and often their parents maybe to pick up and drop off, whole families get counseled at school. So they become more of a community center, not just a place for reading, writing, and arithmetic. And so when I know that we invest a lot in our schools, and sometimes people wonder, why is education so expensive in Vermont? And I think in part it's because we're looking at schools as not just places of learning for kids, but also as a way to support children and families. And it's a great resource. It is expensive, and it's a healthy investment in keeping Vermont a healthy community.
We have a different topic that somebody wants to bring up?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Since you're talking about schools, it goes back to the other topic, but it does have to do with schools.
Could you put your mouth right
I'll try
up the mic?
So we've raised the age of marriage, legislators raised the age of marriage to 18. And the reason for that was because people under 18 cannot make critical decisions. The age of drinking is 21. Can't buy cigarettes until you're 21. Yet because of gender-affirming care in the school system, students can obtain and take hormone therapy to change their gender, and they can do this without parents' knowledge or consent. If they cannot make critical decisions to marry, drink, or buy cigarettes until they are 18 or older, how are minors able to make these gender-changing decisions? This brings me to the H89 again, sorry, but I did ask Senator Hardy and Bray some questions, but they never answered me. So I just wanted to bring these up today. If you're not aware of the bill, we've talked about it, that it's a shielding bill. And as an example, a minor child could obtain hormone therapy or gender-affirming care and then have surgeries to cut off major parts of their bodies. And with this when this transgendered person becomes of age, it does not want to be transgendered and feels that they were pushed into it, did they know that they cannot go back on the providers who have the gender-affirming services? In the UK, there are over 1,000 lawsuits happening right now from those who felt that they were pushed into the gender-affirming ideology. Here in Vermont, those who provide those services would be protected, as we've talked about. I've taught for 34 years, and I'm retired now, thank goodness. And I highly recommend it to everybody.
The retired or teacher?
Retired.
Okay, we got your red light.
Yeah, okay. So in a Vermont school, they're pushing the gender-affirming ideology. And in one school in particular, they're making the kids in grades K to 6 required reading is the book When Aiden Became a Brother. And this story is about a girl who wants to be a boy. And the class reads it, and kids become very confused. And it also points out in the book that parents make a mistake. And that, I feel, plants a seed to undermine parents. In another high school, the kids are pressured to do their pronouns, and one kid's been pressured to say what his pronoun is. He finally got sick of it. He said, "I'm a toaster. I identify as a toaster." And the response was that that's not funny. Some people do identify like that and should make fun of them. My question is, if H89 and S37 support parents directing child's care, why is conversion therapy prohibited?
I don't know it like you know it. Well, again, I'll just say what I said previously. The purpose of H89 is to protect healthcare providers from being sued when they provide care to someone who is out of state, like a college student who lives in Vermont and then goes to Texas and wants to continue to get their care, and then someone in Texas tries to sue them, to sue the healthcare provider. It shields that person. In the Utah governor's statement about vetoing the anti-transgender bill, he said something to the effect of, I tried to pull it up on my phone, but the internet's not great right here. You know, how much time is being spent on so few? These kids are suffering. These kids are trying to figure themselves out just as every single person in this room tried to figure themselves out when they were a teenager. Just like every single person in this room tried to figure themselves out when they were in their 20s. Maybe it was different when we were kids. Maybe it was different of the things that we were thinking about and what we were questioning about our lives and ourselves. But thank God that there are parents and people out there who are supportive to these children, who are trying to figure out their lives, who are trying to figure out how to live in this world and how to be true to themselves. I think it is so important in our lives to be true to themselves. And what I observe is that transgenderism is the hot topic right now. The hot topic was being gay maybe 20 years ago, and I wasn't alive 20 years before that, really. Well, I was 0, so I don't know what the hot topic was then, but there was always these hot topics and people were really upset about them. But really, at the end of the day, it is about supporting our children. It is about supporting kids who are going through so much. And I, for one, will never apologize for standing up for kids who the other option for everything they're going through is suicide. Because these kids are committing suicide at higher rates than children who are not going through this stuff. And fine, if people want to say, well, it's this, that, they're not teaching being transgendered in schools. They're not teaching this stuff in schools. These are things that kids are thinking about and figuring out just in the same way that we were thinking about and trying to figure out our identities back 20, 40, however many years ago. And I'll always stand up for these kids.
Another topic?
I'm Paul. Is this on?
Yes.
I'm Paul Stone from Orwell, and I support wholeheartedly what our representative Joe Adriano is saying. I really appreciate your effort on this, and I support H89. I think if that's the right number. We just need to support our kids. And another quick comment, I think the schools are overtaxed, overworked in what they're expected to do these days. I just think it's incredible that they're doing as well as they are. So to change the subject quite, I guess, drastically, I have two questions. One is on the Affordable Heat Act. I think it's now going to be a 2-year study, and I just hope that the agricultural community is included in that study. And what I heard earlier in the legislative breakfast is that that may not be true, but maybe there's still time to change that. Another topic is the bottle bill. Now, that hasn't gotten much discussion, but there's a bottle bill in somewhere in the legislature, I'm not sure where, that requires us to pay a deposit on all drink that we drink, including orange juice and all kinds of stuff, and it's going to set up a dual recycling system that we have to recycle, curbside recycling, and then we're going to have to lug all of our other stuff up to a redemption center, and I think that's just plain wrong.
So I'll go and thank Paul. Paul's batting 1,000 for the legislative breakfast this season. I think this is the fifth one. So the bottle bill was H-158, passed, I think, on a very strong House vote. It came over to the Senate. It came to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, we just had our first walkthrough of it last week, but I'm very familiar with the construct in it because we sent essentially the same bill to the House, but it arrived too late last session for them to act on it. That was the end of that biennium. They took it up this year and started over and improved it and sent it back to us. The underlying concept for redemption is that if you're the manufacturer creating a product that becomes a problem at some point in terms of what happens to it at the end of life, and we're talking most often like plastic and glass, well, we can include cans in here too. All these things in containers, those containers have to be handled in some way. We don't want to just put them into a landfill. There's a lot of embodied, there's an investment in creating that material and it has value. So how can we best recapture that value? One way that's been very effective in Vermont, we already do this for batteries, we do it for electronic waste, we do it for paint. We make the manufacturers of those objects that become potentially a problem at the end of their life have a role in redeeming or handling those materials. Because if you're the manufacturer creating something that can become a problem, and you know you're going to have to help solve the problem at the other end, you think differently. You package differently, you plan differently, you handle materials differently in order to minimize your cost. That's, it's driven by cost on their side. Turns out to be good for all of us because the materials are handled better. So that's what the bottle bill has done since 1971. But what we drink has changed a lot since then. It was like soda and beer probably were the two main things. Now we have all sorts of thousands of different kinds of drinks. They were left out. It didn't make sense to a lot of people to leave out so many and just stick with the original materials. So that's what we're looking into. The Affordable Heat Act also came out of our committee earlier this year, and it does have, they're developing a plan. I'll say, Paul said study, I'd actually say plan, and the important difference in my mind is that this plan that will be developed and presented to the next legislature, and then that next legislature will have to evaluate it and decide whether or not to enact the Affordable Heat Act. The biggest question pending is what will it cost and what kind of benefits will it deliver? That plan is going to include broad stakeholder conversations along the way, and agriculture plays an important role in that conversation. So I'll be happy, Paul, to talk to you more about it. But the bill contemplates biofuels, which are crops grown to create oil that is then used as part of your heating fuel. So ag has a big role in that, and it's part of the ongoing study.
A question? Tim?
More of an explanation and the question. We hear a lot of people talking about off the wall when it comes off the wall. And a lot of folks who aren't in the legislature constantly might wonder what that means. A bill, when a legislator writes it or has legislative help to write a bill, it comes to the House floor or the Senate floor, it comes up for what's called first reading. After first reading, the bill is sent to a committee to discuss. The chairman of the committee has complete power over all of those bills that come to committee, and they get pinned onto a bulletin board in the committee room, and that they don't come off the wall unless the chair wants them off the wall, or unless the rest of the committee overrides the chair and pulls it off the wall. So that's what off the wall is referring to before it goes to second reading and third reading. The question I have is for Diane, and that is there a legislative pay increase included in the appropriations bill.
So I'll answer the second question first, or not in this bill, not in this budget yet. But there is a bill that I hear over in the Senate that after, years ago, meaning the whole legislature actually had hired through the NCSL to take a look at our structure, to see how Vermont's legislative structure, mostly our own staff, our legal counsel and our joint fiscal, are we compensating at a level that we should be for the professional services that we hire? And the answer was no. And so we've made some adjustments in the professionalism around the staff within the legislature. But you are right. We make right now about $13,000 a year, and then we have expenses, and it's just amazing how every year our per diem for overnight is the exact same rate over at the Capitol Plaza Hotel. It's just amazing how that occurs. But so you have, if you can skip on your expenses, you might be able to offset that, maybe in the past about 18,000. It is not, we are not getting the best and the brightest in the legislature. People have had to leave because they just cannot afford to be there. And I'm very, very grateful because we have military retirement, so I have health care, so there's no health care, no retirement, and it is pretty much a volunteer position. However, it has been looked at, and it would be very advantageous for us to actually increase the amount of money that a legislator makes and maybe offer health care as well. And I think many people actually would almost prefer to get the health care at this point. This would help to make the mix in Montpelier's bodies, both House and the Senate, maybe have younger people that can afford to be there and bring their voice at this level. But it would not be, I would not look to it to be my own. It would be, to be able to vote for something that would give myself a raise would feel really uncomfortable. But it is important that we actually try to take it to the next level, and if we pass this, it would be in years out, that when we're not there anymore, or most of us wouldn't be there, so we would not be self-serving. Does that make sense, sir? Okay. And off the wall, it's introduced from the speaker, and then it goes to the committee. And when it gets voted out of the committee, it goes first reading, second and third on the floor. Thank you.
So just add one note. So there is a Senate bill. I think, I don't memorize all the numbers. It might be 37, and I think it's going to be coming to the floor this coming week. It looks at compensation, just as Diana said, and it is proposing changes for the next legislature. So it's not, it doesn't apply to anyone in office. And I think the basic concept there is, well, two things. One, there are many younger folks who are unable to serve because there are not that many jobs that will say you can step away from your work for roughly 5 months of the year in order to go serve. And so it makes it tricky for people to figure out how to cobble together 2 jobs or more in order to serve in the legislature. Healthcare is another thing. It's become such a cost for people that if you don't have a full-time job outside the legislature, and often healthcare is associated with a job, now how are you going to come up with healthcare? So there are people who in the last 2 years, and in prior years I've seen as well, but quite a few this past session that left because they just couldn't afford to stay in the legislature anymore. So it's not a particularly good situation for the legislature to have people who are increasingly retirees representing everyone who's from age 1 on up. The average age in the Senate is 67, so that's my age. So I have nothing against 67. I think it's a great age, but I'd also love to see more people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s in there, so that we hear the range in the conversation would be better. And again, so it's coming up. I don't know what will happen. but it would be for a future legislature, not this one.
Okay, we got 4 minutes left, so Brian?
My name is Brian Kemp. I live in Cornwall, but I manage a farm right just a couple miles from here in Orwell. On the energy bill, I think it's critical, Senator Bray, that agriculture be in this discussion. We need to be at the table. I can think of 4 farms right in between Rutland and Addison County that have gone out this week. Our fuel bill on our farm almost doubled last year when fuel went up to $4.50, $5 a gallon. Operating costs for the summer. These taxes that we're hearing are scary. 70 cents to $4. How many other things with all the inflation that we've seen across all sectors, how much more can the agricultural community expect a burden with these unintended consequences? I think this energy bill should be just like the solar bills were, with incentives. If you want to put heat pumps in, then and you can justify it and get tax rebates or reimbursements, great. I don't think this should be a mandatory bill.
Thanks, Brian. So the bill is entirely voluntary. Just as you suggest, there are going to be incentives for people who want to do things that help them reduce their costs for heating. So this is a heating bill, not a transportation fuel bill. So the fuels used on a farm that are transportation fuels are not part of what is encumbered by this bill. It's focused on heating, not transportation, and so the connection to agriculture is sort of secondhand, and that is that there is an opportunity for some people, I don't know who will choose, and it's a choice, to participate or not, but the opportunity to grow crops that then yield oil that then can be a supplement to a heating fuel is going to be an individual choice. There's a market out there already. Some people will participate, some won't. I see Mr. Stone on his feet, and he may be getting ready to express a concern about the growing biofuels using crops. There is an explicit part of the bill that addresses the concern that we may see land currently being used to grow food, which is a priority over fuel, may be converted to growing crops for fuel. So it's speculative at the moment how much that will happen, but part of the bill watches for that and says that we will take action to ensure that we're not taking food away from people in order to create fuels to heat homes.
Again, Paul Stone from Orwell, and Chris is correct. I have a statement about biofuels. I'm against the use of biofuels. They should be eliminated from the bill. But Chris, propane is included in the bill, and propane is not a transportation fuel as far as I know. And a lot of farms use a lot of propane, including our farm. We used 12,000 gallons of propane last year to operate our slaughter plant and to keep our baby turkeys warm. And that's included in the bill, and it's not being recognized that agriculture has a big stake in this discussion.
So I'll just say thank you. There's 2 years of study ahead, and I'm counting on people in the ag community. I'll be looking out for myself, but just like one of the themes that's come up today over and over is that legislators are listening to their folks at home, so participate in the discussions and you can help make sure we do better work.
As many as you know, I'm pretty concerned about the Affordable Heat Act as well. Also concerned about this 2-year study thing. I read the bill as passed by the Senate the other day, and I noticed that on February 28th, Senate Appropriations added the amendment that had to do with the supposed 2-year study. What I found so interesting, at least in my reading of the bill, and it's a pretty dense bill, was that the 2 years has to do with the rulemaking authority of the Public Utility Commission. So when I was looking at the bill, I noticed that it didn't have what we sometimes call a sunset provision. So what we'll sort of say is we'll say, hey, this goes for X number of years, and then it's going to die in 2025 unless this happens or something like that. So I was reading through it, and then I noticed that on February 28th, Senate Appropriations adds this amendment that says that there's going to be a check back to the legislature, and over the next 2 years, the Public Utility Commission is going to be putting together the rules under which the Affordable Heat Act will be administered, and that will have to come back to the General Assembly, and we'll have to approve it or deny those rules. One of the things I'm really worried about is I didn't see anything in the bill that said if those rules were not approved by the legislature, then the rest of the bill would be sunsetted, which means to me that the bill would still remain law, but the rules wouldn't be approved. And I don't know what happens then. I mean, I guess it's a similar situation Green Mountain Care is, which is that, hey, it's on the books, but there's no rules to actually administer it, so we're not doing anything about it. But that makes me pretty uncomfortable because, you know, to pass something and then to say that we then approve or disapprove the rules to implement that, but the thing is still on the books, that makes me uncomfortable. It also makes me uncomfortable because in reading the language of the Affordable Heat Act in the sections that didn't have to do with the actual study and things like that, every place where it says the public, or maybe not every place, but I think I saw it was in 90% of the places where it said the word rule, it said by rule or order. Which leads me to the question of under what circumstances can the Public Utility Commission issue an order? I did some research in the statutes over the weekend and I couldn't find a specific answer to that. That's something that I'm going to be asking over the coming weeks as we consider this bill in more depth. But that all worries me because, again, as I've said many times, I can't support something that could have a disproportionate impact on people on fixed incomes, lower income people, elderly people, and our agricultural community as well. I mean, Paul and I have had many conversations about the Affordable Heat Act and its impact on the agricultural community and how they use fuels such as propane in their work. So, I worry very much about what the impact on the affordability will be, and I worry very much about how this provision, this February 28th amendment to S5, appeared to me to only really be about us having a check on the rules as created by the Public Utility Commission, and if we don't approve those rules, we have a law without rule. I just don't understand what happens at that point.
I think we gave you a point. So I suggest that that's our last comment of this session today. If you want to make sure you talk with Chris afterwards, maybe he'll verify that.
Okay, so since we're ending, I'll just say very briefly, well, I'll be happy to talk to Representative Andriano in some depth. There is a powerful word in law, notwithstanding, and what the Affordable Heat Act that says, notwithstanding the fact that we're going to write a rule, this rule cannot be enacted with a full act of the General Assembly and send a new bill through House, through Senate, and to the governor for review. So it's an absolute hard stop. There's no enactment of the rule without a future General Assembly taking an affirmative legal binding action.
Final comments from me this morning is that thank you very much, our legislators, for being with us. And we wouldn't have a forum here if we didn't have you participants that come in. Thank you for being here for this season. Thanks to Jim Morris from Bridport Grange supplying our equipment and so forth that we use for this. On your way out, there's some handouts on the table back there that you need to take a look at and take with you. By the door, on top of the fireman's gear, there's a bag of Cabot cheese. Grab some sticks on your way out. I think there's a cup of coffee left in the bag and some goodies. Go in and help yourselves to those before they completely get picked up. And thank you and have a great year, and next year we'll do it again.
Thank you.